everybody, it's the Ginger Optimist, and today I'm visiting my parents in Georgia, and I thought it would be really nice to interview them and learn some things about their past history. So let's get started. Hi, Dad.
Well, hello, Jan. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Jan.
All right. I am so glad that I have this opportunity. So, Dad, we'll start with you. Can you tell me, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Turner County and Tift County.
Okay, and what did your parents do?
My dad was a farmer, so I grew up on the farm.
Okay, did you have to work the farm or did you live the life of ease?
I lived a life of hard work.
Oh, okay. What was your least favorite chore you had to do growing up on a farm?
I guess I would say pull corn.
Okay.
Back in those days, you harvested corn by hand. Today they have machines.
All right. What was your favorite thing, if there was something that you did on the farm?
When it got dark and we had to go home, leave the field.
So, Mom, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia.
And what did your parents do?
Well, my daddy was in commercial refrigeration.
And he owned his own business, correct?
He owned his own business. He sure did.
Okay, and you guys, didn't you have a maid part of the time when you were growing up?
We did.
That was a little different from you, right, Dad?
A little bit. A little bit.
Where did you go to school, Mom?
I went to school in Atlanta. Adair School, that was the grammar school, and then Sylvan High School.
Do you have a special memory from when you were in school, whether it was elementary or middle or high school?
Well, I had to walk to school every morning and evening. And I remember when I first started to school, we lived close to a railroad track, and I had to cross the railroad track. And of course, I was very young and so afraid that I would get hit by that train.
Do you have any special memories that you could think about and share with us about maybe your father?
He worked at night, and I remember he would put a nickel in his shoe, and that was to keep me to be quiet while he tried to sleep. And of course, I was quiet. Most of the time, anyway.
A nickel would go a long way back then. What would you do with that nickel sometimes?
Well, I would go to the store and probably buy a nickel's worth of candy.
Dad, do you have a special memory of your father?
Well, yes. I remember that my dad was very caring. He was a good dad, a good father, and he, in so many ways, down through the years, he showed his love and his care, and I look back to all of that and just realized I had a great dad.
Think of one special memory about when you and Mom were dating. Can you think of a special memory about that?
Oh, I don't have to even think about that. I remember the time that we stopped at a service station on the way home from church and I bought both of us a 5-cent Coke. That's what they cost back then. She called me a big time spender. But we pulled over under a light there out of the way of the gas pumps and sat and drank our Coke and talked and chatted. And it was while we were sitting there drinking that Coke that God spoke to my heart and said, "This is the girl that I have chosen for you to marry."
Wow.
And see, I had prayed time and time again, "Father, you give me the one that you want me to have. Don't let me choose the wrong one." And so I'll never forget that night or that moment.
And you guys have been married how long?
61 years.
Wow.
Great,
Wow.
great years.
That is wonderful. Mom, can you think of a special memory of you and Dad when y'all were dating that he hasn't shared?
Well, I think of the time that we parked under the light there at that service station, and the Lord also spoke to my heart and said, "This is the one I've chosen for you to marry." And of course, I didn't share that with him at that time. It was later on.
So, do you guys, can you think of a funny story, something funny that happened in your marriage that you could share?
Well, this was before our marriage, but we went to Stone Mountain, Georgia, and we're going to climb that mountain. And somehow we took the wrong road, and we wound up on the other side of the mountain. And we could have very easily fallen off the mountain because it was very, very steep going up that mountain. But we didn't. We partially climbed it and made it up part of the way, and the Lord was with us.
Something that I remember, I don't want Mom to hear this, but I just started to school in the first grade. I lived on the farm, of course, as we mentioned, and I had to ride the school bus to school and back home. And there was this little girl that I didn't know or never met. She didn't know me, but after a few days on the bus, she began to save me a seat.
Ah.
And invited me to sit by her. So I would sit by her. Of course, I got to know her name and who she was and all that. And I remember that. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of sweet too.
Was that your first crush?
Well, she had the crush. I didn't.
Oh, I bet you started liking her a little bit.
Oh, well. We won't discuss that.
Okay. Where did you guys actually get married?
Where?
Where? I know there's a story behind it where it has to do with the Atlanta Braves.
Okay, we got married at Washington Street Assembly of God Church, which when they relocated and built a new church across town, the old church was torn down and they built old Fulton County Stadium where the Atlanta Braves played. And someone said, I had no way of proving it, but someone said that home plate was just about where the altar was where we knelt to get married.
Aw, that's really special. That's really, really neat. One of my fond memories of growing up with my family is we loved to play games. So do you guys have anything to share about games when us kids were growing up with you guys?
I remember very vividly, and it's a very fond memory. When y'all were very small, we'd come home from church and we'd race to see who could get the PJs on first and ready for bed. And the one that got the PJs on first with their clothes hung up, they'd run out and say, ta-da! And so we began to call that ta-da. Let's see who can ta-da first. And we had a lot of fun with that.
Mom, can you think of any game that we used to play that stands out in your memory?
We would pick out something in the kitchen or in the dining room. KT.
So the guessing game.
It was a guessing game. And Jan was just a little tot. And then we would say, KT, she'd say, refrigerator. Or KT, kitchen stove. And and the children, the older children, would get so aggravated because what she said had nothing to do with what we had picked out.
So what would KT represent?
Kitchen table.
Kitchen table.
And I would like to interject something here too. When we would play games like Scrabble or something, if you were losing, you'd say, I'm going to quit.
Oh.
You didn't want to play unless you were winning.
Aw, I'm glad I'm not that way now.
If all of a sudden we missed you and didn't see you nowhere, we would know, we would find you laying down asleep somewhere. If you wasn't in your bed, you'd be on the sofa, you'd be on the floor somewhere, asleep. and we remember that very vividly about you.
Okay.
We used to say she's the only one in the family that really has a lot of sense. She goes to sleep when she's sleepy instead of trying to stay awake.
Dad, what type of work did you do when I was a little girl?
Well, when you were very small, I laid ceramic tile. But then, as you started growing up, I became a pastor and pastored for until
many years.
Well, until 2011.
Okay, that's
I
a
retired
long
from
time.
pastoring at the age of 75.
Wow. Do I remember correctly that at one point in time you were going to, your dream was to be a professional baseball player?
Oh, when I was a teenage boy, I ate, slept, and breathed baseball. And I was pretty good at it.
How far did you go with your baseball dream?
Well, my goal was to one day play for the New York Yankees. At the age of 18, I was scheduled to take spring training with a minor league baseball team. But in the meantime, I gave my heart to the Lord. He called me to preach, and I never pursued it any further.
Except for on church teams you played.
Oh, church team. Oh, we had a great time with church teams, yes.
I remember many times going and rooting for you guys.
Oh, yes.
What was your favorite position to play?
I was a pitcher.
And a good pitcher.
I was a pitcher in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Softball, it didn't matter.
Mom, what kind of work did you do?
When we lived in Conway, South Carolina, I got a job at a department store in the lingerie department. And I worked during the Christmas season. And of course, people would come in and pick out gifts for their family. And I enjoyed that.
What did you do in Dawson?
Oh, I used to work at the school in Dawson. When we first moved to Dawson, I worked in the grammar school there. I worked with reading, teaching reading. And I love to teach. We worked with children that were below level in reading. And that was a very enjoyable thing for me. I was cut out for that type of work. I have good memories of working at the school, teaching reading to students that were below level.
That's very good. You made a real difference in their lives.
I hope so.
Mom, what was your favorite thing to cook?
I cooked a lot of cakes to raise funds for remodeling the church.
And you baked them from scratch, right?
That's right. I baked them from scratch.
Well, I put up a video on how to make your, which cake was that?
Carrot cake, I think.
No, it was your red velvet cake.
Oh, okay.
I put up a video. In fact, I'll put up a link if you want to learn. I tell my mom's tricks of the trade. If you want to learn how to make a great cake from scratch, you can watch that video and you'll know all her tips and tricks. Okay, so how many grandchildren do you guys have?
We have 7 grandchildren.
And how many great-grandchildren?
Would you believe? 15.
Wow, that's a boatload of great-grands.
Let me begin by talking about the experience of sharing the Frosties. You see, every summer when Rachel and Rebecca, the twins, were small, we would keep them a week. We'd go pick them up, take them home, keep them a week, then take them back home. Well, this particular summer, we went to pick them up and was on the way home with them. And we were just about home. We stopped at Wendy's. And would you believe, I was short on cash, but I had just enough cash to buy 2 Frosties. Well, Rebecca and I shared one, and Rachel and Mom shared one. And we enjoyed them, you know. And we finished them up, got up to leave, And as we started out the door, Rebecca said, "But Papa, I needed a hamburger." I felt so bad, that I didn't have the cash. And at that time, there was no such thing as debit cards.
Right, right.
So I remember that very vividly. And I remember one time about Daniel. We never kept all three of them. We didn't have the nerve to try all three at one time. We'd keep the twins. We didn't want to separate them. Then we'd keep Daniel. So we had Daniel one week. And it come about time to take him home, and he said, "But Papa, I don't want to go home." I said, "Why, Daniel?" He said, "Well," he said, "one of the twins always beating up on me." But I carried him home nevertheless.
Well, do you have any funny stories about my oldest daughter, Misty?
Yeah, since you mentioned that, when she was staying with us once. She and I went to the store, and not a supermarket or anything like that, just a little country store right on the side of the street. And I left her sitting in the car and said, "Honey, I'll be right back." So I went to the store, and sure enough, I came right back. Well, when I got back to the car, she was sitting on the steering wheel, and she motioned for me to sit over on the on the passenger side.
And I believe she was, what, about 3 or 4 years old?
3 or 4 years old. She was going to drive home, and me sit on the other side.
That's funny.
Yeah, I remember that very well. That was sweet. They stayed about 3 weeks with us one summer. And we're taking them home. Y'all lived in Springfield, Missouri. Mm-hmm. And it was a long trip. And we drove all the way through. Something I said I'd never do again. But I promised the girls a Frosty. And that thrilled them, excited them, to get a Frosty. But we never did run into one, and I was afraid when we get to a strange town, I was afraid to deviate and get lost and all that, so I just kept my straight route. But finally, we found one. But before we did, dark came, and we still hadn't found a Frosty.
Wendy's.
Wendy's, to get a Frosty. I looked in the rearview mirror, and those girls were sitting straight up, leaning, propped on each other, asleep. They didn't want to lay down and go to sleep. They was afraid they'd miss the Frosty.
Aww.
But eventually, we found one, and we got them the Frosty. They enjoyed it, and then we continued home. But that was so heart-touching to see them. They did not want to miss that Frosty.
Well, Dad, I can remember one time when I was a young teenager, you and I had stopped at McDonald's in Albany, Georgia, and we were going to get a bite to eat, and we ordered our food, and when we went to pay, you pulled out your wallet, and your wallet was empty. Yeah. You remember that?
Very well. I thought that I remembered having a $5 bill in my billfold. I knew that I did, but when I opened it up, I didn't. Mm-hmm. And so it was very embarrassing. And I told the one that was waiting on us, I said, "Listen, I'm sorry. I just knew I had a $5 bill and I'm broke." And he went and got the manager. And the manager came, and I explained to him. He said, "Well, just pay me the next time you come in." And I said, "Well, we live in Dawson, Georgia, about 20 miles away from Albany." And he said, "Well, you come to Albany, don't you?" I said, "Oh, yes, I have to make hospital calls and everything all the time." He said, "Well, just pay me the next time you come in." I thanked him, and he was so very nice. Mm-hmm. There's still some nice people in this world.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, you and I went out to the car, and you said, "Daddy, I've got some change." And I said, "Well, I've got some pocket change." And you counted out yours, and I counted out mine, and we had enough nickels and dimes and quarters to go back in and pay for our meal. And that's something I will never forget.
Dad, do you have any funny stories about my sister Debbie or my brother Stan?
Well, I remember when Debbie was, just old enough to begin to talk a little bit. And our grandmother, or well, Mom's grandmother, which mine too, you know, was having lunch with us. And we were all seated at the table, but we hadn't prayed yet. And Debbie, she picked up her fork and started eating. I said, hang on, Deb, we hadn't prayed. She looked at Grandma Turk and said, Dano, are you hanging on?
Aw, that's so sweet. What about Stan? Any funny stories about Stan?
This was back when he was, a very small boy, very small. In fact, before you were born, and Debbie was just a couple of years old. We were running a grocery store in Gainesville, Georgia, and I was out burning boxes after we had stocked. I was burning boxes in a 50-gallon drum. And Stan was in the backyard, which was fenced in. The neighbor's chickens had gotten in our backyard. And I heard Stan saying, chinned in, I'm gonna tell my mommy on you. He couldn't say chicken, he said chinned in. I said, son, what that chinned in do? He said, that chinned in, bop bop on that baton. I said, well, son, what was he supposed to do? He said, he's supposed to use the dash doom. I'll always remember that about Stan.
Okay, so Mom, can you share any stories or story about my sister Debbie?
Yes, I remember it. I worked and came home later than they did. They were in school, and if their dad had left dirty dishes in the sink from eating lunch at home or something, you know, that needed to be taken care of, when I would get home, the dishes would be done, everything would be cleaned up, because Debbie would make sure that everything was clean by the time I got home. She didn't want me to have to come home and face dirty dishes or face something that needed to be cleaned up. So Debbie would do her best to get everything cleaned up and out of the way, dishes washed, dried and put away, and just everything that she could do to keep me from having to come home to dirty dishes and things that needed to be cleaned up. And that's a good memory to me, to know that she cared about me not having to come home to dirty dishes or floors that needed to be cleaned or whatever. And that'll always be a fond memory to me.
Debbie was the good child. Daddy, do you have any funny memories about me?
I do. I really do, hon. I remember when you were growing up, small girl, I had a pet name for you. I'd just call you Stinking Rotten. I'd say, let's go Stinking Rotten. That was just, to me, a pet name. But one day, you and I we were pastoring in South Carolina, Conway, South Carolina, and you and I went to the store somewhere, and we were riding along. And out of the clear blue, you said, Daddy, do I stink? I said, no, honey, why? You said, you always call me Stinking Rotten. And it had never crossed my mind that you would take that like that. And I had no idea. Down through the years, I said, no, honey, you don't stink. That was just a pet name. And I apologize for that.
That's okay. You can call me Stinking Rotten anytime you want.
Well, you really are.
Well, y'all made me that way.
There was another time you were older, and we were you and I were riding uptown, Tifton, Georgia. I'll never forget it. And just driving along, and I guess I was in my thoughts, and you weren't saying anything, and all of a sudden, out of the clear blue, you said, "By Jove, I think I've got it." And I've never forgotten that. I never knew where you got it. I still don't, but that's another fond memory.
The guy in the center is my brother Stan, and The little girl on the left is my sister Debbie, and I'm the little girl with the curly hair on the right. Well, I just want to tell everyone watching, I had the meanest parents in the world, and I'm so thankful. My mom and dad, when I say it, they were the meanest parents in the world. I don't mean that literally. I mean that they were the kind of parents that they told me no. Sometimes I didn't like it. Sometimes I would just get so angry at them. I didn't let them know it because they would have knocked me to New York and back, but I would be so upset because they would tell me no about certain things. Mom and Dad, I love you. I love you with all of my heart.
Well, we love you, Lamb.
And I'm so grateful that I have the privilege at age 55 to still have both my mom and my dad. That's a great joy. And if it shocks you that I'm 55, you can comment down below as long as you don't say, oh my, I thought you were 75. But anyway, what a great honor to have such wonderful parents that loved me and brought me up knowing and loving God and knowing how to be responsible. Well, thank you so much for watching The Ginger Optimist. If you enjoyed this, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up. And if you're not following me already, I hope you will. God bless. Bye.